through 8. If you are a teacher, perhaps you're an 8th grade teacher and you also teach NC Math 1, on Wednesday we will be having a webinar that focuses on the graphing calculator. And that would be a great, another great thing for you to perhaps focus on Wednesday afternoon. We're gonna do another one of these for the high school courses. My name is Beth Nash. I am, whoops. We can get you guys to mute yourselves, please. My name is Beth Nash. I am the test measurement specialist for middle school and high school math and science. My contact information is here. We'll share contacts again at the end. Just a few housekeeping. Everyone should be muted due to the size of the webinar, but I've heard a couple folks. So if you could just take a quick moment to double check that you are muted. We are expecting 400-ish folks today. We are recording the webinar, and we will be posting it to the DPI website. For anyone who has registered for the webinar, tomorrow, hopefully, you'll be receiving an email, and it won't come from WebEx and it won't come from me. It will come from the listserv from NC Public Schools. And so that will have the link to today's recording, and it will also have all of the links that Nolan will be sharing with you. I'll be copying those down so that you'll have them for easy reference after the fact. Today's featured calculator is found at this bit.ly link, NC Scientific Calculator. Keep in mind that bit.ly is picky about its capitals and lowercase letters. We do have the link to today's agenda and slides here. Those are also 2 bit.ly links. And once I turn things over to Nolan, I will be dropping those in the chat for you if you'd like to follow along. And then one last note, NCTPI is not offering any CEUs for today's webinar. And so that is for watching live with us or watching after the fact. We're sorry, but we are not able to offer any credits. A couple quick notes as far as technical issues go. We've got 2 different modes of communication on today. We've got the Q&A and we've got the chat. If you are struggling with technical issues, so for example, if you cannot hear, if maybe one of your colleagues is trying to get in and for whatever reason they can't get in, or someone forgot to register and they'd like to get in last minute, if you would please send a private chat to Molly McGahee. Molly is doing our behind the scenes tech support today, and she can get you the call-in number if you need. She can also get you some invitations if you need to include someone else. I will also be using the chat feature to share those links that Nolan is going to go over with us today. And so by sending them through the chat, if you have more than one screen, you'll be able to click and get directly there. If you have content-related questions, we're going to ask that you please use the Q&A feature. And the reason for that is that it allows us to kind of track the questions. And if they're easily answered, I can click on them and just give you a quick reply. Otherwise, it allows me to group them and make some better use of our time. So we will be stopping periodically to address any questions that you all have, and then Nolan will also save a few minutes at the very end for any questions if we need to double back. So again, technical difficulties, private chat to Molly McGahee. Content-related questions, please use the Q&A. All right, and with that, we are fortunate to have with us today a Desmos certified presenter, Nolan Doyle. And with that, Nolan, I am going to pass the baton to you, sir.
All right.
You should be in the driver's seat.
Thank you very much. Let me get my screen shared. I'm excited to join all of you today. Thank you all for joining. I know after a full day of teaching or supporting teachers, whatever your role may be, for you to take time out of your day to now learn something new is fantastic. And your students that you work with, your teachers that you work with are definitely going to benefit. So thank you all for joining. That bit.ly that Beth is going to drop in the chat as well. It's going to be on these slides, and this has an agenda. It's all the links I'm going to leave you with here today, and I'll kind of be referencing it throughout. So feel free to open it up in another tab, or just sit tight and sit back and watch as we go through. Just a little bit about me. As Beth mentioned, I am a certified presenter, so I was lucky enough to become part of the Desmos Teaching Fellowship in 2015, and then worked towards becoming a certified presenter. I'm also a classroom teacher full-time, so I'm currently in Chesterfield County, just outside of Richmond, Virginia. And so what I really hope to bring to you here to this afternoon is, in this presentation, kind of a mix of all the wonderful things I've learned from the Desmos team, but also incorporate my own personal experiences in the classroom, as well as working with other teachers in Virginia and really all over the country as they learn to use the Desmos tools. In that agenda, you'll see kind of an overview, but just real briefly, we're going to do some introductions, and then we'll jump into seeing the scientific calculator. And we're going to focus mainly on how to access the version that is specific to North Carolina. So we want to make sure you're using the correct version with your students. After that, we get to my favorite part. We're going to actually do some math today, so that'll be fun. We're going to look at how do we actually teach with Desmos. So beyond this calculator tool, what do these activities look like? How do we engage our students in the classroom and learn with some of these other tools that are available through Desmos? So you'll experience an activity from the student perspective while I model different teacher moves that are possible with the amazing teacher dashboard. We'll do a brief little bit of time where we can actually find and set up those existing activities that are already made, as well as building your own activities. We'll jump in throughout the day, kind of checking in for those questions, as Beth mentioned, and we'll have a little bit of time at the end as well. But as you can see, this is a lot, okay? So what I want to make sure we understand, the learning goal today is not going to become an expert. I recently did a full day PD where we spent, just 2 hours on the calculator. It was the graphing calculator, but still 2 hours on just the calculator, 2 hours on just facilitating activities, 2 hours on actually building your own activity, and it still wasn't enough time. So, what you're going to get today is not all the how-to, right? That's going to be where you can go back, work with your colleagues, work on your own at your own pace, and click all the things and explore and really know the step-by-step of how-to. What today is, it's more of a what can, and then I'm going to provide you with those resources for what next. So what can Desmos do? What is actually possible? So hopefully you'll be inspired, hopefully not overwhelmed, right? But then those resources are going to be there for you to come back and explore a little more at your own pace, because there's going to be a lot of information thrown at you today. So just a little bit of background on Desmos itself. So Desmos believes that all students are brilliant, and our jobs as teachers is to tap into that brilliance to help students learn math. So that's kind of where Desmos is coming from as they're designing and providing all these wonderful tools for us as teachers. The biggest thing I want to emphasize too is that, they're about being accessible. And so everything you're going to see today, whether it's the calculator tools, whether it's the classroom activities, those are all free and they will always remain free. That is the promise that Desmos has made. Desmos also is guided by specific equity principles and pedagogical philosophy, which we will not have time to get into in our hour today, but we invite you to learn more about that on our website. Everything on Desmos can be found at desmos.com, but kind of in my head, as I think about the tools that are available, I think about the calculator tools at desmos.com, which we'll see in just a little bit. And then these activities that we'll jump into. And as a teacher, I'm going to access and search and find and set up these activities from teacher.desmos.com, which we'll visit. And then you, as the student today, will get into one of these activities at student.desmos.com. And that's where your students will log into and join these different activities that you may set up for them. So we're going to start by taking a little bit of time to make clear how to access the different versions of the scientific calculator. So as I mentioned, at desmos.com, we can go to the math tools in the upper left-hand corner, and we can get to the scientific calculator directly there. But we do not necessarily want to access that version because we want to get to the version that is specific to North Carolina. And so all the links I'm about to visit for you are in that agenda. So the general scientific calculator that I just showed you, this will take you directly there. But I've highlighted the next two links that are specific to North Carolina. So as you go to desmos.com, if you go under resources and assessments, and we scroll down to the map and we're going to find North Carolina. So that second link will actually take you directly to this part. It'll save you a few clicks. And this is all the information here that you're going to need as educators in North Carolina as it pertains to Desmos. So we can click directly on the scientific calculator. And what you'll notice is the green band at the top. So we know for sure that this is the North Carolina version versus if we had joined just the general scientific calculator, you wouldn't see that green band as I have open up here in another tab. There's also this PDF. So this is really helpful to show what those actual differences are. So each state kind of meets with Desmos and says, hey, this is what we want. This is tools we want added or removed. And they create their version specific to North Carolina. So as we scroll down, we're going to see really two things you really need to kind of know is different about the scientific calculator. The keypad, is going to be alphabetical instead of the QWERTY keypad. And then defining functions is going to be disabled. So I'll show you what that looks like as we explore the actual calculator. So in the scientific calculator, we are on the main tab here, which has our basic numbers and operations that we can enter in and go to the next line as we get our answer on the right-hand side here. Notice the division button will automatically put it as a fraction. We have a few functions here and symbols that we might use, as well as the percent and fraction key. And then we also have the full alphabet here, and this is where you would see the alphabetical keypad instead of the QWERTY one that you would see on a keyboard on a computer. We have a few more functions here, some of the ones that were repeated from the main, but additional functions that might be useful to you and your students on those tabs. So just be aware that we can go through those three tabs, as well as a quick toggle back and forth between radians and degrees, if we happen to be using any of those trig functions. And another feature I'll show you is as we get decimal answers, we can quickly toggle back and forth between a fraction and a decimal. And then also the answer key. So one thing I like about this is I can hit the answer. It's going to take the previous answer, and I can actually put it in multiple spots pretty easily. Another thing I like about this is that I can go back and edit any of these lines. So I'm getting all these new lines. It's saving all my previous lines. And in addition to that, I'm just clicking and I can go back and edit those lines, and it's still going to update and give me the new result. And that includes when I'm using the answer key. So you can see I'm now having an error message because it has nothing to evaluate. A lot of the error messages are pretty helpful. I know some calculators, and it's hard to tell, okay, what's the error here, but it's pretty descriptive. And now it's going to update my answer where I have it in the following line as well. I can clear out just one character at a time. I can clear out the whole row. After I clear that row, I have the option to clear everything in the calculator. These arrows here are just my undo and redo. So if I accidentally clear everything out, I didn't want to, undo that. The defining functions that we mentioned earlier, so in the full scientific public-facing version, what that means is we could define a function with our function notation, and then it might evaluate such function as we reference it later on. Whereas if you tried to do that with the North Carolina version, we're going to get an error message. And again, it will just tell us that that is not available in the current calculator. All right, so the basic features, you've seen different functions, being aware of the different tabs here, and also being able to go back, as I mentioned, to the different lines and edit. I feel like that's really helpful and ease of use as you're going through, using it as a teacher or as a student. All those links are provided, as I mentioned here, and a few more resources on learning and familiarize yourself with the scientific calculator is linked here as well. So I'm going to stop and just check in with Beth real quick to see if any questions have come up or questions come up right now before we move on to actually teaching with Desmos a little bit. But at this point, we just want to make sure you can access the calculator specific to North Carolina.
Hey, Nolan, so far I've been able to handle everything just by resharing links. So I think we're good for the moment.
Awesome, awesome. Well, yeah, continue to jump into the Q&A if things come up. But what I want to jump into now is really getting into teaching with Desmos. So we're going to look at an activity. So what I'm going to have you all do to start is to head to student.desmos.com and enter in this class code. Okay, so open up another tab. You'll type in student.desmos.com. Feel free to log in or continue without logging in. Either one is fine for today. And enter in that class code. And we're going to take some time to work through an activity where you're working as the student, and then I will jump in as the teacher and show some teacher moves. If you're joining us, yeah.
Can I get you to drop that copy link into the chat for us?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
So that link will take you directly there from the chat, and we'll actually enter in the class code for you, maybe save you a few clicks, a few steps. It's always helpful for my students. And again, if you're joining us, maybe you can't jump into the activity depending on the device you're on. You might be joining on your phone, or you might be doing something else while listening. You can just keep an eye on my screen, what it looks like from the teacher end before I actually invite everyone back to explore the teacher dashboard. But as you enter, you'll notice the first screen is just going to let you know that, hey, these few screens are taken from a larger activity, which is linked there as well as in our agenda that you could visit and use later on. And then you're going to navigate to the second screen and just play around with that screen. So just take a few minutes to explore and click and play. You're not going to break anything. So navigate to that second screen and play around and see if what's happening is expected or unexpected, and just make sense of that second screen a little bit. So as you enter that activity, you should be able to navigate top of the screen using some arrows to the second screen. And you won't be able to navigate past the second screen. There's nothing wrong with your screen. That's me. I have pasted you to just those first two screens. So you'll navigate to that second screen and just take another minute or so to explore and play around and see what's going on that screen. All right, about 20 more seconds, and then I'm going to pause you guys and have you come back and look at my screen. All right, pause is coming in 3, 2, 1. All right, so your screen should be paused if you're in that activity, exploring, and this is one thing I would use with my students anytime we're going to direct them back to kind of a whole class discussion or something I need to address with them. So if you bring your attention back to my screen, this is the teacher dashboard. And so we're going to go through the different views, which are in the upper right-hand corner, as well as some of the tools here you see in the upper left-hand corner that I've already made use of as far as pacing and pausing. So I'm currently in the summary view. This gives me a list of all the students who have entered this activity. It tells me what screen they're on. And in this case, it's telling me if they've interacted with that second screen or not, that dot. And so this is a good place as students are entering, maybe, hey, let me help out certain students who aren't able to navigate to the right screen, or maybe if I've opened it up to a few more screens, someone's maybe moving too quickly and I need them to step back and review some of their answers and go a little bit more slowly and purposefully. Or someone who's going a little too slow and maybe needs some help. I know where to circulate in the room and help out. So that summary gives me a quick overview of where everyone's at. I've already made use of the pause button, so I can pause students at any point where they would not be able to interact with the activity on their screen. And I also paste you to the first two screens. So you can see this. These two screens are part of a larger activity of 8 actual screens. So I can stop that pace at any point. We could pace one screen at a time. So we could actually move through this activity together. Okay, everyone's on screen 1. Let's all move to screen 2 together. Let's all move to screen 3 together. Or as I did, right, we could do a range of slides and say, okay, work on these at your own pace. And then we'll come back together just like we did here every once in a while and pause and discuss. All right. Oh, I apologize for that announcement.
648, please report to the bus loop immediately. And if you're waiting for bus 648, please report to the bus loop immediately. Thank you.
All right, the last thing there is to anonymize. So as I click that, I love this feature. So as students are working, I'm going to see their real names. But maybe as I start to collect student work and answers, I'm going to anonymize. And so as we start to display student work, no one has to worry about whose answer that is, whether it's right or wrong. We have these mathematicians' names, so we can clearly present the student work, and everyone feels safe. We create a safe environment there. As I go into the teacher view, I can click the tab, or I can actually click on the screen. That's where I'm going to see everyone's work. Okay, so I can kind of see what people are entering in as they're working. The student view is what the student sees. So for this activity in particular, what I might have done to start is actually have you guys pause, have the students pause, and just do this together with students. So, you know, just try out, okay, x greater than or equal to 0. Let's see what happens. And we just kind of do this as a class as they're watching my screen. And we think, okay, was that expected? Is that what you would have expected to do? Then maybe unpause and invite them to try some more and see what they come up with. Then come back together as we are now and see what they observed. Is there anything interesting or surprising that happened? And if it doesn't come up, maybe we direct them and push them to try something like x less than 10 and see what happens there. And compare that to maybe x less than or equal to 10. And we start to see when Shira is happy, when Shira is not. And Shira is completely happy once we do that less than or equal to. And I love this first screen. Desmos has a lot of activities like this where a couple things are happening that I love. One, the student is getting interpretive feedback instead of evaluative feedback. And so it's not just a, hey, you're right or you're wrong as we're going through this. It's, okay, put something down mathematically, and now let the technology give you feedback, interpret what you're saying. And then the student has to think, okay, let me adjust it. And they're starting to make connections between that algebraic, in this case, the graphical representations. So that interpretive feedback is huge. And they're able to just play around. And they're able to try a lot of different examples to start. Okay, so that's where the technology can provide a lot of benefits. The other thing is I love the context, right? So I love having this activity to start our talk about inequalities. And that idea of including or not including a certain value in our solution. So, a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, we can talk about that idea of do we need to include the solution or not? Think back to Shira the sheep. Did we want Shira to be able to eat that blade of grass? What did we have to do to include that one blade of grass at 10? So I love the context and kind of that anchor to come back to conceptually as we move through the unit. All right, so you've seen some of the tools here. We've seen the summary view, where I'm getting a quick glimpse of where everyone's at, who's in here. The teacher view, where I can see individual results. And then the student view, where I might use this to kind of model what we're supposed to be doing as we're discussing as a class, or even come up with an example that students hadn't yet that I want to make sure we address. The other thing I'll mention is the teacher moves right here. I can click on this tab, and I love this. It's going to give you some suggestions of, hey, this is how you maybe want to start the activity. Maybe you want to pause here. Maybe you want to pace here. Here's how much time maybe you're going to give students, to explore and play around. Here's some things you might want to talk about. So with these activities, it's a very different way to teach. And these teacher moves are super helpful as you're starting to get used to teaching in this manner and how you might use some of these tools that you've seen up here. So with that, I'm actually going to pace you all to screens 3 and 4. And I'm going to unpause you and just give you another minute or two again to get a feel for the activity as a student. And then I'll come back and explore once more some of the moves you can make as the teacher. So again, take a few minutes to navigate screens 3 and 4.
So Nolan, this seems like a good time for this question.
Sure.
So is it possible to have two separate ranges on the same activity? So this teacher says for an activity, she created a range of slides that she wanted the students to work on. And then she wanted them to skip a few and then do another range of slides after it, but she couldn't seem to get it to let her do that, to work on some, skip some, and then work on some.
Sure. You can actually, and this is actually a newer feature that I have not made use of, but so instead of using pace, what you could do is you could hide screens. And then so like on my screen right now, if I unpaced and I just wanted them to work on these first 4 and these last 2, I could hide those screens and then allow them to navigate. So they would skip over those hidden screens as they go through. So I think that would address being able to have the 2 different ranges, and you have the option to then unhide them at any point. Great question. So take another minute or two, explore screens 3 and 4. If you finish up, you can head back and look at my screen and kind of see what I'm doing as the teacher as you wait for us to come back together as a class to talk. All right, so I'm not going to pause you this time, but if you want to come back to my screen, I've still got that summary view up right now. So I love this. I can see, again, where everyone's at. And screen 3 had a clear, correct or incorrect answer. So you can start to see some check marks, right? So that the technology is able to tell us clearly if that's correct or incorrect. Those dots, again, just mean they've interacted and maybe there's something as the teacher that you need to look further at on that screen to interpret what's going on. But I love screen 3, again, thinking about what students are doing and how this helps them with the concept. Okay, we had a screen where we wanted to include that blade of grass, and now we've got this little cliff. We don't want to include that value as our solution to make sure shear doesn't fall off. So you could even explore and see what happens when you put or equal to. We've got the nice animation there of what's going to happen. And then screen 4, we get into some thinking a little bit more of this deeper conceptual understanding of what are we actually finding when we find solutions, right? We're finding solutions, we're finding values that make the statement true. So I loved when I was scrolling through here, the teacher view now, I'm seeing all these update in real time. So I start to see the words like true statement or plugging in, solution, right? So all these things I'm starting to see, I can start to collect these and display them for the students for our discussion. So if you notice these little camera icons, if there are ones I want to use, I'm going to click on that. It says Snapshot Captured, and it's starting to collect them under the Snapshot tab. And so if I go there, I can start to put them on different screens and order them and how I want to present. So we can come back as a class and say, you know what, as we're talking about this screen, hey, this is great. We can determine if it would be true at 0. How do we do that? We've got to plug it in and evaluate each side and compare the sides, right? So seeing that statement as a comparison of two sides, thinking about a balance, right? When we have an equation, both sides are equal, right? When we have an inequality, one side's heavier than the other one. So we have all these conversations and we can stem those conversations around the student responses here. You don't always have time to collect those snapshots, so that teacher view is really kind of my go-to. Most of the time, I'll just kind of scroll. And again, it's in anonymous mode, so we don't have to worry if there's some answers there that people might be embarrassed by. We don't have to worry about that. And then we can just pick certain ones that we might want to talk about as a class. All right, I'm just going to go through. You can come back and explore at your own pace, but I did put a few slides from another activity, which is called Marble Slides Lines. So this is more of a practice, definitely once we've taught the concept of slope and y-intercept, but this allows students, and this is a super engaging activity, but to adjust the equation over here so that these marbles will fall and hit all those stars. So right now, they are not hitting all those stars. So I'm gonna have to play around here with my slope and my y-intercept. And once I do, success. And go on to the next one, and maybe they don't have it here for you at all. You've got to build it from scratch. So again, using our knowledge of slope and y-intercept, we might be able to collect all those stars. And we can even go next level here where we have to maybe restrict our domain a little bit. So maybe we don't need to adjust the slope, the y-intercept. And again, the line doesn't have to go through all those stars. It just has to create a situation where the physics here of it falling is going to hit all these stars. And they have a whole collection of these activities that are anywhere from lines, parabolas, sine and cosine, rational functions. You can build your own. It's definitely a little time consuming, but there's a lot that's there. And my kids have loved these. They get really into it. They will cheer when they get some really challenging ones and figure them out. And the creativity of what they can do. There's not one way to get these stars in a lot of these puzzles. So there's multiple ways for students to be creative in applying that slope, y-intercept, and really domain and range. You could restrict based on range as well. So that's what's really cool about some of these. And their understanding of domain and range becomes so much deeper and more it sticks because there's a purpose for it. So again, we've got the summary view, you've seen the dashboard, you've seen that teacher view of seeing all the responses at once, student views, what the student sees, and snapshots, the ability to kind of collect and sequence what students are saying. And so all these tools just fall right into the 5 practices if you're familiar with this publication from NCTM. But you know, we're going to plan, we're going to anticipate student responses, what questions we're going to ask. I mean, so much of teaching is asking the right question at the right time. And so we got to plan for that. And then as we start to get students' responses, we're going to monitor it. And I love the dashboard because it's giving me an insight into every student's thinking, right? Every student's thinking. Yeah, I can walk around, but I'm going to balance that with just seeing all their responses on that screen. I can then start selecting and sequencing with those snapshots, or even just the teacher view of what I want to go over, making notes of, okay, now these are the questions I want to ask based on what I'm actually getting, you know, formatively here with students. And then we have those discussions in our ability to connect different ideas within the math. So here's a few more examples of just how the dashboard, I think, really collects, organizes, and allows you to really have some great conversations with your students. So this, I was just asking, again, the content isn't necessarily as important as the type of questions I'm asking and how I'm using the dashboard here. So what I want you to focus on is the question is very open-ended. It's just, hey, what do you notice about this graph? We're going to start with the picture. It invites that informal language for students. But also some students might be ready to start using some vocabulary. So some students are talking about solutions. They're talking about the x-axis. And so we can start making those connections about solutions being the x-intercepts. What I might use the dashboard for here is that teacher view where I'm seeing everyone at once. I can display this because it's the anonymous names. Everyone feels safe. And we can just start saying, hey, do you agree? Disagree with these? Are there any you have questions about? And I love talking about in my class the word it. Our students use the word it all the time. Well, what is it? Is it the same thing in everyone's response here? So it doesn't have 2 solutions. The function, the quadratic equation, what are we saying? It is on the x-axis. Are we still talking about the entire function? The entire function's on the x-axis? No, we're talking about the vertex. And so we can start bringing in that more formal vocab. And it creates a need for the vocab. Right? Like, why do I need to know what the vertex is? Well, it's going to help us communicate better. It's going to help us all be on the same page. When I say vertex, we all know exactly what I'm talking about. Another thing the dashboard will do, so this is where students were typing in their answers, and it's going to group all the same answers together. So what I'm seeing on the dashboard right now is a question where they typed in an inequality, and I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students who all typed exactly the same thing. And these 2 students typed exactly the same thing. And these 2. And then these individual students, again, anonymous names here, typed in this. And so I love displaying with the dashboard questions that have more than right answer. And I just say, okay, who's right, who's wrong? Right? We start to have a little debate. Maybe we get students justifying their speaking and having to defend their answer. And I love having a conversation about this first one being equivalent to this one. Okay, so y greater than 1, y greater than 1. These mean the same thing. Right, and having that discussion is awesome. And I think what's really important that I don't want to gloss over, something small but really impactful, is that it's one thing for me to just like tell them, hey, these are the same thing. But it's another thing when it's their responses and it's coming up organically through their work and their thinking that we make those connections. Because they're much more engaged. They're looking up here. Where's my answer fit in this? Where's my classmates' answers fit in that? Are we saying the same thing? So their brain's working a lot more than if we were just telling them, hey guys, these are the same thing. You can also have students sketching. So I might ask them to sketch where explicate is one of its factors. Again, the content isn't as important as understanding, hey, we can have students sketching a lot of correct answers. We can pick out ones that are different or interesting, not only because they have cute pictures, but because, hey, this is only one solution. Right? What would that mean for the equation? We can start then bringing in the other representations. It would have 2 factors explicit. It's a double root. Oh, this one's upside down. What does that mean, right? We can talk informally about it and then start talking formally about the equation. All right, it's reflected. We can start using that formal vocabulary. We can start talking about, well, what would have to be in the equation in order to get that reflection. This is another one where they had to sketch in this point. In this case, they only had to sketch a single point. and they needed to create a line with their point and C that was perpendicular to the given line. And what we can do with the sketch, what I love, is we can see the individual responses, but we can toggle back and forth on the dashboard to have a sketch overlay. So this is everyone's point together on top of each other on the same graph. And where there's darker ones, that means there's more answers there. So we have a lot of students that pick this point here. For these fainter ones, most of these are probably individual points. And I love this opportunity. This is a quote I saw from Marilyn Burns about a student's wrong answer is most often the right answer to a different but related question. So our job as teachers sometimes is to think about, well, what question were the students answering? And I'm going to turn that back on my students. So if I'm going to display this and have a conversation with my group, I'm going to talk about, okay, this point down here. This is a wrong answer, but change the problem so that it's the correct answer. So a couple of things happen here. One, we're pushing student thinking forward. Students who got the right answer, sometimes they check out, they're done, right? Their thinking's over. Students who got it wrong, they're done too. They're like, oh, I didn't get it right. Like, I'm bad at math. But now everyone's thinking a little bit harder about, okay, what do we do to change this problem? Well, we just have to change one word, parallel. If this had said parallel, this point right here would be correct. And now that person who was wrong, maybe their thinking was validated a little bit. They don't feel as bad. Because, hey, it's just one word that starts with P that they misread. And now everyone's on the lookout for that. And then we could kind of go to, okay, now let's celebrate these answers here and all this thinking. All these answers here, all these other points knew that the line had to have positive slope, opposite slope. But only a few, you got that precise reciprocal, opposite reciprocal slope. So we can start our conversation with incorrect answers. We can push thinking forward. We can validate everyone's thinking as we're pushing the entire class to where we need them to be. So ultimately, it comes back to the dashboard when you're thinking about, hey, why do I want to do one of these activities, or why should I build an activity? It's how are we going to utilize these tools in order to create discourse around student thinking? So it's not our thinking as teachers that are leading it. It's the student thinking, and we're there to facilitate and push it forward to where we want them to be. All right, so as we think about building with Desmos, we're really going to kind of start with making sure we can search and find what's already there. So as you see in the agenda, we just did that activity. There's a student link there that we use, as well as a teacher link, so you can access anything from there that we did. And as we move into building with Desmos, let's actually see what's already out there. So I put some links here. The first one is Awesome Activities. It's a PDF, but it's interactive, so you can find just a few that Desmos has selected that are pretty awesome. Marcellus is amazing. I love that one. But you can click directly on that, and it will take you to the activity page. The other links there are some featured collections by Desmos. So that will take you to that teacher.desmos.com, and it's groups of activities that would be great for grades 6, 7, and 8. It says distance learning. They work great in person as well. Exponential functions, functions in general, inequalities, that's an awesome one. Intro to the coordinate plane. So different topics, different grade levels that you can find activities. And then I did give you, this is a teacher I've worked with through Desmos. She was a teaching fellow as well, but she's got some awesome activities for all grades levels. So that's a spreadsheet that you could search through. So those are kind of ways to find some activities you want. You can also search at the search bar at the top by topic. So you can think about linear functions, and it might take you to one of those collections we saw, or it might find, in this case, some that I've created or edited, as well as ones that are polished by Desmos. You can also search by type. So we talked about marble slides, so I could just search for the different types of marble slides or card sorts, which we'll see a little bit later on. And once we get a certain activity that we like, so I'm actually going to go back to that Marcellus activity that I really like. We get to that activity page, we can scroll down. These are all the class codes I told you I liked that I've used with students or even with teachers about Desmos. But we scroll down and we've got a preview of the activity. So I can click on that preview and I can just go through like a student and see like, hey, is this something I want to do with my students? You'll notice you can also see the teacher moves and sample responses that we saw on the dashboard. So you can kind of think about how this activity is going to play out. So you find this activity that you like. As I mentioned right here, this is where I can assign it. So maybe we have some classes set up already. You can assign it to my classes that I have set up for this year, or we can just create an individual session code as I did for you all. You can see how long it's going to be active for my students, but those will all populate here. You can do an individual one for each class period. You could even break it up within a class period if you have small groups. When I hit view dashboard, now I'm to that dashboard, into that link that I would share with students and they would enter in. So any questions on finding activities and setting them up at this point?
We'll give folks a moment to see if they want to populate anything. I have to tell you, the chat has been quite lively, just with people sending kudos about how sharing their personal experiences, how much their students have been enjoying these activities, how you have just kind of leveled them up in what they can offer their kids now. I don't have any questions right now, just a whole lot of happy folks sharing their excitement.
Awesome. Yeah, that's what we need, because that's how you guys are going to learn from each other too. And so hearing, again, the more teachers that have actually been in there and doing it, that's going to speak volumes. And so hopefully at this point you've seen a little more too of like, okay, how do we leverage these tools and maximize what students are getting out of them. So I'll just add too that at the top of the page here, as you're planning, if you want the teacher guide, it gives you a PDF of the activity, but you can also start to organize within collections. So at this point, I kind of have too many collections, especially after last year. I just didn't have time to stay organized, but you can start labeling them, and you can apply more than one tab or label, I should say collection, to the same one. And so as you start to organize, you can find those activities grouped together. I also do a bit of planning in Google Docs. So if you just want to get the link to come back to, okay, I'm gonna use this next year, you can get that link there. And then the last thing I'll say is we can actually copy and edit. So if I click these three dots, I'm gonna copy and edit this activity. So again, I would start with things that are already made, but tweak them, right? So maybe there are certain screens that you would want to delete. This is a very long activity. So maybe there's a few screens at the end that I might get rid of. So I'm now in the building mode a little bit, and you can see all the different screens at the top and then different components within those screens. But there might not be a lot that I want to get rid of. There might be things I want to add as well. One way you can add too is you can copy and paste different screens from other activities. So one thing I really like that Desmos has to offer, let me get signed in, but are these featured collections and starter screens. So these are not standalone activities, but they're activities that have screens that you might want to put into your activity. So I'm on the activity homepage, and when I click on the preview, I can copy this screen. Just click this button in the upper left-hand corner. You can see it's copied now. And I can go back to where I was building. And I'm just going to hit Control V, and that screen pops up. So again, I was at the activity home screen here for check-in screens. You can do this for any screen and any activity. And I copied it, and then I came over here and hit Control V and pasted. So this is a good way to, if I want to preview here, maybe start the activity, just checking in with my students. How you doing? Tell me more before we get into what we're going to get into today. I can also change the name up here. So it defaults to copy of. So maybe, this is depending on how we label and organize lesson 2.1, we're going to do Marcellus. So that's my new name of the activity. I've edited what I wanted to. Maybe there's different screens where you even change just the vocab. based on what you use in your class is a little bit different than what Desmos did. But I'm ready to publish. This is now my activity, it's my own version. If I search, it will now come up in my search. It's not going to come up in anyone else's search. I can add it to a collection, and I can create my class codes. I can assign it to students. So as I mentioned, start with what's there. I gave you a few resources here, quite a bit actually, of different activities. You can also do just a general Google search, and you'll see different things, but I tend to lean more towards the ones I know that are polished, that are made by Desmos, or some of these from teachers that I know have really, really good stuff. So those are all available to you there. And we've got a little bit of time. I just want to show kind of building from scratch a little bit. And this is going to be not nearly enough time. It's going to be way too quick, but I just want to make sure you're aware of it. And then in the resources here, I've got some general resources, some things here about teaching with Desmos, so maybe a little bit more about snapshots if you want to go back and learn more about that, different things with the dashboard. But these are little quick videos, either that Desmos has already made or I made my own, and they really walk you through step by step of, okay, building your own activity from scratch. And my recommendation is always, hey, start small. Just do one screen, warm up, exit ticket, and then think about the dashboard again. How do you want to make use of the dashboard? So when I'm at teacher.desmos.com, I'm going to hit custom activities. And these are all ones I have edited or created on my own. But in the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to hit new activity. I'm going to give it a title, and I'm going to hit create. And again, all that's even mapped out with videos here, beginning a new activity. And I'm back to that screen we saw earlier when we were editing, but I don't have any screens built. So my title is up here. I always go back and edit. I can add screens. I can delete screens. And then these are the different components I can add. So a few things that I would point out that I think are the most useful. The first thing would be kind of an ordered list. So we could order just some numbers from smallest to largest. And I could take some math type, maybe just put a few different types of numbers in here. And then if I hit preview at any time, I can see what students are going to see. So it has smallest labeled here to largest, and they would need to kind of move around and order them. And this is what the dashboard would say. So right now it's not giving me a check mark. I can get a check mark there if I say, hey, I want an actual answer key here. There is a correct answer that I want Desmos to come up with. And so now I just need to make sure that it's in the correct order here so that it can check it that way. And so now you can see what's going to be on the dashboard until they've moved it in the correct order. I can also add directions here. So in the title, or you could even add a note here. So maybe I didn't want to put in the title, but I want it just a little bit smaller here. But we can kind of click and drag and move these things around a little bit. Always hitting that preview to see what students are going to see. Just a couple more screens to show a few of the things that are really valuable. I like the sketch. We talked about that. So with the sketch, when I add that component, we can preview. They can sketch right here on just a blank canvas. We could put an actual graph. That graph could be blank, or that graph could have something on it already. So maybe we're asking them to find the vertex or find the solutions, and they're able to kind of sketch right on that graph. You can also put anything you've saved. So if I have something, I did this with the elementary folks, they could sketch, or I do a lot of these with my geometry classes. So maybe, you know, they need to sketch on a picture, they're counting these and showing me how they count them. So it could be any image that you've saved, you could have that there for them to sketch. And I love the dashboard because you can see each individual sketch, or you could have a sketch overlay. So, you know, something maybe graph, you know, a line where the x-intercept is 4. And you could get a bunch of different answers, but they're all going to, then when they're on top of each other, it's really going to emphasize what has to be true, what doesn't have to be true, or the same about each line. There's your typical multiple choice as well as checkboxes, which just means more than one correct answer that you can play around with. But the last thing I'll show is a card sort. And I love card sorts, again, just thinking maybe it's just one screen. We can add cards here that maybe we want them to match. We can easily put some math type, so it's formatted as a fraction. We can do just plain text. And we can add an image, again, something that's saved to our computer or desktop. Got a fraction one, yep. And so when I hit preview, students would need to group these together. No answer key right now, so it's just a dot that it would be displayed on the dashboard based on what I've done. I've interacted, but I can create an answer key. And I love the flexibility of you can create as many groups as you want. You can have cards that end up not being grouped. So however you want to create that card sort, and we can see now it's correct based on my answer key. So again, just a few things of building, seeing the different components, not getting into all of them. But once you're done, you can hit publish. And again, this is now your unique activity that would show up when you're at teacher.desmos.com and you search, or when you add to your collections. And you could also share it with other teachers as well. So to get more into building, and like right here, learn more about each component, since I just showed you a quick glimpse of a few of them, this link here is really helpful. You can actually see examples of a graph component, of a table component, of a sketch component, and so on, and really get an idea of how to best utilize those. All right, so kind of wrap up and check in, see what questions we have, but hopefully you get an idea of what's available, and it's about creating things for students to get their thinking out there, and you as the teacher to be able to display and talk about that student thinking as you're taking advantage of these different tools. And then you all hopefully can take advantage of these resources. Feel free to reach out to me as well as Desmos. They are super responsive. So small questions, large questions, anything, please, please, please reach out to Desmos and that support team, as well as myself. Because it's something I love sharing with other teachers because it's really, really powerful.
All right. Well, I am handling a couple quick questions in the chat, mostly related to wanting to get their hands on your agenda and your slide deck. So we will continue to share those. It will continue. It will be shared when the email comes out. I have to tell you, Nolan, what I'm seeing both in Q&A and in either chat that's been sent publicly or that's been sent privately to me, it's just an overwhelming amount of excitement and gratitude for the wonderful job that you've done today, and a lot of interest in leveraging the tools that you've shown us today into daily classwork. If you would not mind, sir, to give me the presenting privileges again.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, so just a couple quick reminders again as we head out today. We have recorded the webinar. The webinar will go out probably tomorrow. You're going to look for NC Public Schools as the sender. It won't be from WebEx. It won't be from me. It'll be, we're using, due to the number of folks that have registered, we had to switch to a different email server. So look for NC Public Schools. When you get that, it will have the recording to today's presentation. It will also have all of the links. So the link directly to take you to North Carolina Scientific Calculator, the link to Nolan's agenda, the link to Nolan's slides, and the link to join the activity that he had you guys do at the very beginning as a student. That will also be there for you. It'll also have contact information for both me and Nolan. North Carolina Department of Public Instruction is not offering any CEUs for today's webinar. That's either for viewing live or watching after the fact. We're sorry, but we just can't offer them. And again, you will receive emails tomorrow when you get the follow-up, but just in case, here's my email. If you have questions related to testing in North Carolina, how we embed the calculator, North Carolina check-ins, North Carolina interims, EOGs, EOCs, those are all questions for me. If you have questions related to the content related to what Nolan was showing you today, so Desmos functionality, there you have Nolan's address. And with that, Nolan, do you have anything you would like to add before we log off today?
No, I think you've covered it. So just thank you all for being here. Like I said, it's great to see so many people in here after a full day, and I really enjoyed it. And don't hesitate to reach out to that email of support@desmos.com or my personal email as well.
Okay, thanks guys. Have a great night.